Name is Pregna and I'm currently doing my BTech first year in Sahi University. Today I am about to discuss the topic loops from C language. What are loops? Loops are fundamental programming structures that allow you to execute a block of code repeatedly based on a condition or for a specific number of times. We use loops when we need to perform the same action many times, like counting to 100 or processing a list of items. There are three types of loops, and they are for loop, while loop, and do while loop. First, let us discuss what is for loop. The for loop is often used for iterating over arrays, executing a task a fixed number of times, or other count control repetitions. And here, this is the syntax for loop. This is initialization. This statement is executed only once at the beginning of the loop. It typically initializes a loop counter variable, and this is the condition evaluated before each iteration. If the condition is true, the loop body executes. If false, the loop terminates. And this here is the updation executed after each iteration of the loop body. It usually updates the loop counter variable. And when we use for loop, when we know how many times the block of code is to be repeated. Now let us look at an example for loop. Int I is equals to 1 is the initialization. It initializes an integer variable I to 1. This happens only once at the beginning of the loop, and here I is less than or equal to 5. This is the condition, and it checks if the value of I is less than or equal to 5. The loop continues to execute as long as this condition is true, and I plus plus is the increment. It increments the value of I by 1 after each iteration of the loop. The output of this code will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. To obtain for loop for infinite loops, for loop we have to keep the initialization condition and updation empty. Now let us look at while loop. The while loop is designed for condition control repetition. Here this is the syntax for while loop. The condition is evaluated at the beginning of each iteration. If it's true, the loop body executes. If it false, the loop terminates. We use while loop when the number of repetitions are unknown and depends entirely on the condition's outcome, such as reading user input or waiting for an event. Now let us look at an example for while loop. Here, count is equals to 5. An integer variable named count is declared and initialized with the value 5. Here, while count is greater than 0. This is a while loop. The code inside the curly braces will continue to execute as long as the condition count greater than 0 is true. Here, this is count minus minus. This statement decrements the value of count by 1 in which each iteration of the loop. Therefore, the output of this example will be 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. To obtain infinite loop for while loop, we have to replace the condition with 1. Now let us look at do while loop. Do while loop is particularly useful when you need to perform an action and then decide whether to repeat it based on the outcome of the action, like obtaining valid user input. Now, this is the syntax for do while loop. The code block within the do part is always executed at least once, regardless of whether the condition is initially true or false. The condition is evaluated after each execution of the loop body. If true, the loop repeats. If false, it terminates. We use do while loop when you know you need to perform an action at least once. For example, prompting a user for input until a valid entry is provided. Now let us look at an example for do while loop. In this code, I is equals to 2 and n is equals to 3, 10. This line declares and initializes two integer variables I to 2 and n to 10. The variable I is the counter and n is the upper limit of the loop. This is a do-while loop. The code inside the loop's curly braces will execute at least once before the condition in the while statement is checked. I is equals to I plus 2. This statement increments the value of I by 2 in each iteration. Therefore, the output for this code will be 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. To obtain infinite loop, we have to replace the condition with 1 in here. Now let us look at nested loops in C. A nested loop is a loop inside another loop. The inner loop executes completely for each iteration of the outer loop. Let us look at an example for nested loops. Here, this is the outer loop of the code and this is the inner loop of the code. Nested loops can significantly increase computation time. If an outer loop runs m times and an inner loop runs n times, the inner loop's body executes m into n times. Just like in this code, the outer loop is running 3 times and the inner loop is running 2 times. So, the total execution will be 3 into 2, 6 times. The inner loop completes all its iterations for every single iteration of the outer loop. Control passes back to the outer loop only after the inner loop finishes.